Perfect. Folks, welcome to Tribecast webinar by Ben. Today we will be having a really cool speaker with us, Ben. And before starting, a huge shout out to Browser Stack, our exclusive sponsor for all our community events and premier sponsor for conferences. Now I would love to invite Ben on the stage. Just a second. Welcome to Tessite, Ben. Can you give us a
Hello.
quick intro about yourself, and then we can start? If that is part of the presentation, it is okay.
Absolutely. Well, I'll say a very quick hello, and then I also have some more details about myself in the presentation. Okay, let's go. So, welcome to um, this webinar, Learning to Love Technical Interview Exercises, with myself, Ben Dowen. You may also know me online as the Full Snack Tester. Um, Before we start, and I will share this as well separately in the chat. Feel free to go grab the slides if you want to follow along with the slides as we go along. Then you're very welcome. If the version of the slides that you can download there, which is a PDF version over on my GitHub, doesn't work out well for you, or you just want them on Google Slides, I'm sharing in the chat now a link to a read-only version of the slides on Google Slides. The advantage of the link on Google is also that they are um, an attempt at being slightly accessible. I've tried to add alt text to the images. A quick kind of accessible introduction to myself. I am a male with ginger hair and a beard. I'm currently wearing a kind of dark orange jacket, and I've got a background here which is not my own, just to blur off the kind of messy office behind me. And as I said before, I'm joining you from England, in the United of the Kingdoms, in a little village not far from Sherwood Forest, Robin Hood country. So let me introduce myself a little more. I think you've had plenty of time now to look at the slides. I will show the link again at the end. So a little more about me. I have been working in software testing now professionally for nearly 11 years. This summer it'll be actually nearly 12 years. It's been 11 years already. This summer it'll be my 12th year in the industry, and I've worked for a number of different places during that time. I've also spent a fair amount of time engaged with the testing community, and various different testing communities out there, and learned a lot from other people. And I have a love for testing. So I've had a number of different roles, whether that's quality engineer or test engineer or quality manager. Um, Never simply tester. But I do love software testing, and it's one of the things that I really find um, very privileged to do, being able to kind of engage to the QR code if anyone wants that for the slides. Hopefully, anyway, you were already able to grab the slides from the link I shared. Um, let me just quickly show you my first slide, because you've missed out on that glorious me in the slice of cake. So, for any of you, the images throughout the presentation, I've generated this using generally Bitmoji. So on this one, you've got a nice picture of me there, being the full snack tester eating some cake. And on my slide, there is a picture of me wearing a yellow jacket and sliding in. And I'll go back to introducing myself. Okay, so I love software testing, and I love being collaborative, and I really appreciate that. Very fast feedback there, Aaron, telling me that my slides weren't being shared. Absolute classic, easily done. And it's really important to say I'm here to learn, right? So I am on a journey, and I'll tell you more about my journey as I go through the presentation. And I'm still learning, right? So 11, 12 years through the industry, and obviously still learning how to give webinars and make sure my screen is shared. But I'm also still learning about testing, still learning about technical interviews, and I'm very interested to hear more from all of you. So, if at any point you feel the desire to follow me on social media, absolutely do so. I'm on all the socials, especially LinkedIn. You can find me Ben Dowen, and on all the rest of the social media, you'll find me as Full Snack Tester. I am embarrassingly easy to Google, so you will find me. Don't have any fear of that. Um, and yeah, so it's really important to say, if you have ideas, you maybe have more experience than hiring or automating or doing technical interviews than me. That is entirely possible. Share stuff with me. It's absolutely fine. I'm very much here to learn as well as to share my experience so far. So I hope you do follow me on my adventure. My adventure is one of learning to love technical interviews, and I do have some love for technical interviews. I also have some fears, some anxiety, some doubts, and some things that I want to be more confident with. So, on my adventure to gain that confidence, I'm inviting you as a testing community to join me, and I hope you get the opportunity to learn to love technical interviews a little bit more and learn to love technical interview exercises especially, and we'll get into that in a moment. While I remember, I'm just going to open up a quiz. In fact, I'm not sure I can I publish that? Let's give it a go. I'm just going to try one just to set the interaction up, make sure this is working. I've published the quiz on what is your favorite snack. So feel free while you're listening to me to answer this one, and feel free to put in the chat if one of your options isn't on there. Snacking's pretty big for me. If this works well, I've got another question I can throw at you in a little bit as well. So, where did my adventure begin? Once upon a time, I worked at a company called Citrix. For those of you who don't know, Citrix were a big kind of enterprise company, very much based in America, and they do a suite of different products, delivering apps and desktops in a virtualized environment, and hypervisors, and all sorts of really kind of key infrastructure pieces that a lot of companies around the world rely on. They're a big organization. When I was working there, and they're not the same today as they were when I was there 11 years ago. Um, there was 10,000 employees and like 2,000 engineers. So for me, that was a very big scale coming to this job straight from university. And my interview at Citrix, my technical interview at Citrix, looked a lot like there were some smart guys in a panel interview that I was facing who asked me a lot of questions about all sorts of different things technology. Now, when I went to that interview, fun fact, I didn't know whether I was getting interviewed to be doing a dev or a test role. They actually had one kind of interview funnel for graduates that was for the dev role or the tester role. So I didn't know until I got offered the job afterwards that they wanted to offer me the tester role, and I was relatively new from, this was my first job interview after university. I didn't even know very well the difference between what a tester and a developer was 100%. Um, and I learned a lot while I was at Citrix, which was very valuable. And then sad times hit. About 5 years, 5.5 years into my career at Citrix, I thought I was doing a absolutely bang up job and I was doing just fine. But Citrix went through one of its cycles of laying people off and restructuring and redundancies. And unfortunately, I was one of the ones to get let go. And this is when I first learned about redundancy and the fact that, jobs don't last forever. I was really thinking while I was at Citrix, this could be my career for quite a long time. And that didn't turn out to be the case. Thankfully, I also met a whole load of people while I was at Citrix, and I went on to go and work for a small consultancy company called Control F1, where one of the people I'd worked with at Citrix helped me get the interview and get that job. And the interview for Control F1 really looked a lot like, um, let's have a relatively informal chat. I think I said something really. I was coming with a lot of confidence, having worked at Citrix, and I coming to this small place. I think I said something like, "Oh, it doesn't matter what it is that I'm testing. The way that I can test anything. It's fine." In retrospect, I might not be quite so confident in my answer today, even so I have more experience. But I was, a bit younger and a bit more confident. And hey, it got me the job, so things worked out well. Um, and I learned a lot about culture at a small company, what it was like to work with customers very, very directly. I actually had stand-ups where we had customers in the stand-up, and for a little bit of time, what it was like to manage. So I managed a small number of other testers while I was at Control F1, and things were going well. I was a big fish in a small pond. I'd had promotions. I'd been there nearly 2 years. Oh, this one hit me hard. So, um, if I set the scene for you, it was New Year's Eve, and this was New Year's Eve, the 31st of December, 2019. And as you all know, 2020 was a very challenging year. So the 31st of December 2019, I got a phone call from my manager. I'm very sorry, Ben. There's been a board meeting. The whole company is gone. The funders have withdrawn their funding. The company has immediately dissolved. You no longer have a job. So I was like, oh, brilliant. Happy New Year to you too. Cheers, mate. I mean, his job was gone as well. But yeah, so that was a very extreme experience. It was redundancy, but of the worst kind. The company simply disappeared overnight. So then I was job hunting. And my previous two jobs, if you remember, I'd had a job straight from university and a job where a friend of mine knew a guy and I went and walked in and got the job. So this was really my first time going out there and having to apply for jobs and having to go to multiple stages of interviews, and it was a very different experience. And I actually interviewed at a number of different places. Some of them, the interview looked a lot like, first stage, here's a technical exercise, go away and do that first, and then we'll have you in and we'll have a panel interview and you can talk us through your technical exercise. Go write us some test automation. Some of the other interviews, I think I interviewed with 4 or 5 places, were less formal. Um, but there was a couple of different places that got me to do code-based interviews. And the one I ended up at was PA Media. And actually, so for those of you who don't know, so PA Media are actually the UK Press Association, not to be confused with the Press Association, the international organization. But I wasn't working directly for the newspaper. I was working for their betting services team. So we were doing services for like the horse racing industry and kind of the gambling industry. And it was tough because it didn't really gel with me very well. The domain, I didn't really get on with that. Like, in best case scenario, I helped some people get the right price on a horse. That wasn't really working out for me. And as well as that, there was a whole load of problems in the organization that I wanted to have impact changing, and there wasn't a hunger for change. So I left PA Media, having had a good 16 months of experience, mostly writing test automation. So that was good experience. But yeah, mic drop. I went away and ran to my next set of interviews, and I interviewed for a bunch more places, and I ended up at Ada Health. And while Ada Health, I didn't actually have a technical testing interview that had take home exercises or coding exercises there. I did at some of the other places I'd been applying for, and then I ended up at Ada Health. And how's it going? So at Ada Health, actually things are going very well. I'm currently not looking for a new role. I'm not interviewing. I'm not out there at the moment looking for a next thing. Go me. The important thing though is you and Shay Crompton says this very well. always be available. Now, always be available doesn't mean you need to be disloyal to the company you're in. But a lesson I've now learned very hard from my previous redundancies is I need to be ready to interview if things change, right? If the situation changes, I might need to learn to do this quickly. So things are going well, but while things are going well, I want to gain my confidence. I want to be ready for my next round of interviews. And you know what? And I don't know how well you relate with this, but at the moment, everyone wants a unicorn. What do I mean by that? I mean that the market has really changed since I started 12 years ago, right? Everyone wants someone who can coach and be a quality engineer and knows how to test the front end and the back end and write test cases and do exploratory testing charters and test on multiple devices and get deep domain knowledge and help the product team and write code and write test code and write test tools, right? So people are really those jobs that are available now, not all of them. There are some notable good exceptions. Um, but it worries me that the market out there at the moment, people are really chasing unicorns. So I'm like, okay, I need to get good at interviewing for technical roles because at such a point in the future where I end up on the jobs market again, hopefully not for a while. Um, this is the jobs market as it currently stands, at least in the UK, in Europe, where I am. I appreciate jobs markets internationally can be quite different, and I can't comment on all the jobs markets out there, but I maybe you can relate some of this. And I'm just going to take this moment to close this poll. I wonder if I can share that on stage. Let's have a quick look. Did that work? Oh, someone give me a shout out in the chat if that worked. So we've got a good split of chocolate and popcorn. Little bit of nuts, not so many other comments. Although I think there's some comments in the chat. Oh yeah, and a whole load of people typing chocolate and popcorn in the chat. This is good. So thank you very much for indulging me. In that, let's see. Now, I hope I am presenting again. Let me put this other poll on there. So the next poll is, do you write code as your day job? So I'd love to know, and we'll have a look in at this poll later on, how many of you are actually writing test code or building tools or doing production code as part of your day job. So let's get on to the meat of it. Let's get on to the interesting bit. Technical interview exercises. So there are different types of technical interview exercise that you might come to when you're interviewing for a job. There's a handful that I know of because I've done those technical interviews as part of the jobs that I've hired for. Although, let's be straightforward, I've only applied for a relatively small handful of all jobs that are out there. And I also know other people in the testing community, and I've spoken to them about hiring and about different jobs. And I've hired a few testers myself. So I know that there's a few different types of things out there. So you could come across kind of different shapes and sizes of technical interviews. So ones that are either live, and they could be on a whiteboard, they could be a pairing session where you're doing some live coding, they could be a pairing session where you're doing some live exploratory testing, or they could be take home exercises. And what I really want to talk to you today is a little bit about those kind of take home exercises, but lots of other things are out there. And throughout my journey, I will start looking at more of these different areas of technical interviews that you can have. But for the rest of the presentation, I'm mostly focusing on um, those things where you're asked to maybe write a little bit of test automation or write some test code as part of a exercise you do before you go to like a panel interview stage. Um, so let me continue. Okay, so I did speaking of polls, I did a poll on LinkedIn a little while ago when I was coming to do this topic. You're sitting down to do that technical exercise for your test automation interview. What do you wish you had more confidence in? So remember, my journey is all about gaining my own personal confidence, and I can really relate to this, right? So people are wanting more confidence in setting up their development environment. They're wanting more confidence in understanding what is expected. Interestingly, from this relatively small sample that I got, the kind of help people want is not necessarily help writing their test code, getting more confidence in writing the code itself. Now, that's good because I'm not going to teach you how to code. There's lots and lots and lots and lots of other ways to do that, and there's tons of stuff out there already. But that's the kind of where is at the moment. But I am going to talk to you a bit about understanding what is expected of you, and a bit about setting up test environments and development environments. So where does software live? I like to think I know a bit about where software lives, and I'd love to hear more about where you think software lives. Um, you can think about this as you need to create a comfortable habitat for your software. Ben, whatever do you mean? Well, for those of you in the room, and I haven't had a quick check in at the poll to see how many of you are actually writing code in the day job. For those of you who are writing code in the day job, you might know some of this already. Um, the system under test, or the SUT, is code that needs to be executed, needs to be running somewhere in order to be useful. Now, obviously, depending on the type of code, whether that's a web app or whether that's a mobile app or whether that's some kind of other application that could be a desktop app or a business process or whatever it is, it needs an environment to run. But what do we mean by an environment? So it could be that that is a whole bunch of containers. You're talking Kubernetes, you're talking Docker. It could be that that is some either physical tin or some virtual machine somewhere where you've got code running. Could be a web server, could be all of these things. But you need to have a think about where that is. Now, bringing that back to technical interviews, you might be asked to test something, and this is what I've been asked in the past, where it's something public, right? So I tested a MetaWeather API that was a public API that was publicly available. I didn't have to set that up locally. I just had to have an internet connection. Or you might be asked to run some software on your computer. Now, typically, when you're actually in the job, when you're doing a testing job, you'd be running that system under tests within the company. You also need to think about where your automation is running. Now, when you're doing this and you're building your technical exercise, that'll be running locally, could be on your laptop, on your desktop, somewhere like this. Um, but when it's running in production, that's going to be running probably some kind of CI/CD system, and it's important that you understand those integrations because when you come to responding to a technical interview exercise, that knowledge of where that code's going to be running in the future is going to be important to you. The environment also includes all those things like databases and supporting services, third-party APIs. I won't go on any further on that one, but it's definitely an important topic. Um, Also, something that's worth paying attention to is like it might work on your machine, or it might work on the machine of the person setting up the technical interview. But learn how to manage your programming language and your version managers, right? So I'm not going to go into a huge amount of detail on this one, but if you're not comfortable managing the version of your Java, of your Ruby, of your Python, and managing those dependencies, practice that. That's really worth practicing because it will take you longer than you think, and you will waste time when you're doing your technical tests if you don't have confidence running that, right? So that's something that's worth practicing. It's also worth noting that your IDE might be able to help, depending on which integrated development environment or kind of code editor you're using. You might be able to learn some tricks that help you manage the version of your dependency, help you manage the versions of your languages that are built into, for example, the JetBrains IDEs like IntelliJ, or there's all sorts of stuff within VS Code. Also, if you find that you're coding your technical interview exercise kind of response on a Windows laptop because perhaps that's what you've got at home, but you might be working towards a technical interview where they're going to be running something like a Mac or a Linux. Using WSL or Windows Subsystem for Linux and the integration with VS Code can really be a lifesaver because you can use those tools like NVM, like the Node Version Manager, that you might be familiar with in the day job um, easier through that Linux kind of layer in Windows than if you were just using native native Windows way of managing these things. Um, and finally, a pro tip about learning your IDE's shortcuts. And if you grab a copy of the slides, I've got links to these kind of cheat sheets on there for VS Code and for the JetBrains idea stuff. In an interview, especially if it's a live interview and you're pairing with someone and they're watching you use an IDE, get comfortable using it. Get comfortable using the shortcuts. If you're comfortable using the keyboard shortcuts for your IDE, not only is it going to save you time, it makes you look confident to your interviewer. If you use none of the shortcuts and you don't know the IDE, you're going to look like you're less competent in the way that you do your code. So it's a useful one. So finally, we get to the task in hand, the actual exercise itself. So the first thing to do, don't panic, right? Let's use your testing skills that you already have to break down the challenge. So you already have critical thinking skills. You already have tools in your toolbox like mind maps. You can take the text of the task you've been asked to do and treat it like you might at work. Break it down into smaller parts. Try and figure out the kind of things that you're being asked to do. And ask clarifying questions. So if they say, okay, you've got a week to do this automation task or a week to do this technical interview task, then you're going to have your next round of interview. Don't leave it to the last minute. Make sure you're at least reading that task you've been given, breaking it down, and if it doesn't make sense, ask smart questions about it early because it shows that you're engaged, that you're paying attention. Could be a red flag if you're asking those kind of questions very late in the process, just before you're about to submit, kind of ages after you've been given it. So pay attention to that, but do ask questions. And be aware of implicit requirements. So you possibly have a feeling for this, depending on how long you've been testing and what kind of industry you're in, what kind of company you're in, that the explicit requirements, the things that are in down, the things that you're being asked to do, aren't always all the things you need to do. Now, when it comes to testing, that could be something like performance testing that you're not asked to do, but actually it's something that's important. When it comes to a interview exercise, this is going to be things like being thoughtful about your approach to the task. Okay. What do I mean by that? Right. So what you're actually being judged on is not just that you can complete the automation task that you've been given. People expect you to be able to complete that. It's also how do you approach the problem? And it actually matters less if you complete the task than if you can demonstrate your thinking. The other thing is write your code in a way that makes it easy to run, right? What do I mean by that? Write a README and tell your interviewer exactly how to run that code. Um, and try and make your intentions explicit if you can. So if you can add little code comments, you can maybe write a note to your reviewer in the actual, whether it's a PR request or whether it's in the README, some way, try and make what it is you're actually trying to do to respond to this obvious and easy to be judged on. And be honest if you've had help. So this is really important, is if you've used AI assistant, if you've found stuff from websites, make a note of it, right? Call that out. Add a references section to your README, whatever you feel you need to do, but don't try and hide that. You'll probably get caught out, and definitely you're going to look kind of disingenuous. You need to be honest. If you've done that, just say it, right? Or ask a clarifying question. Does anyone mind if I use these tools as part of it? Perhaps you're going to work for someone where they expect you to use something like ChatGPT as part of your role. Then it's a good idea to make use of those tools. Or they might say, please, for this challenge, don't use any AI assistance. It's important to make sure that you're clear if you're doing that. There is never enough time, like the clock continuously ticking down on this very presentation. When you are taking on an interview challenge, now that could be whether it's a live interview, but especially if it's a take-home test, however much time you think you have, pay attention to the fact that you might have less time. Now, what do I mean by that? Your time might be eaten up by problems setting up your environment, right? You might run into challenges, you might get stuck. Give yourself, like, start as early as you can, but also be pragmatic, right? don't try and add tons of bells and whistles to your response before you get the core thing working. Make sure you're meeting those minimum requirements as early as possible. And if this is like some kind of time box challenge where like, hey, this should only take you so many hours, you're actually one of the implicit requirements that you're not being told is you're being told to prioritize your approach to this, right? You're not being told just add extra effort to this. You might make a choice, for example, I don't know, you're going to use page object model, but you're only going to do it for one example, and then you're going to put some to-dos in to add it everywhere else, right? You don't need to overinvest in a perfect response. And actually, it's better to not overinvest, but leave them wanting more, right? Note down those things you either couldn't get time to do, or even better, things you would have done if you had more time, right? Throw that out there. Don't let them ask you. Put it in your response. Put it in your covering email to them. Put it in your README. Like these are the next things I would do. Right. Highlight technical debt that you've potentially built up because you've rushed. Things you didn't get to. Things that you would have loved to have done but you didn't get time. Maybe suggest future enhancements, either enhancements to the automation or enhancements to the system that you're testing. Right. You can say, hey, this would have been easier if we did it this way. This would be really important to respond to. When I put some of these questions out on LinkedIn, one of the things people were kind of responding to the question I was asking on LinkedIn, where they were saying, "I love it when candidates come and go." Why on earth is it like this, right? Like, I would want to do it this different way. So, yeah, that's because the technical interview question, the exercise, might be based on something which is deliberately awful to give you a chance to make those comments. So pay attention to that. Things you might, just throwing these out there are some suggestions for free. Things you might suggest for future enhancements to the automation that you might not get a chance to do. Adding data-driven testing, if you've not managed to add data-driven testing. Um, Adding Docker support. Getting tests running in CI, like something like Jenkins, something like GitHub Actions, and abstracting things into utility classes to make them reusable, right? So all these kind of niceties that you may not get a chance to demonstrate, you can still call out, hey, I know how to do this, but I need to be given more time. Okay, practice, practice, practice. And this is where I'm at the moment. I'm finding different ways to practice at technical interviews so that I can get better at these things. And I appreciate that you might be wanting to do the same. So I'm going to quickly run through a few examples and I will try and speed things up a little bit here, but this is the good stuff. So let me share this other tab and I'll zoom in a little bit. And I hope that's visible. Okay, so this isn't my response. This is so when I was interviewing for this one company, right? This is actually the technical interview test for Poker Stars, or it was a number of years ago. And I actually interviewed here and I did a version of this test and I submitted it and I did get offered a job, but I actually didn't take it up. I was looking to look away from the racing and betting industry. I don't think they're using this one anymore. It doesn't look like it's had much activity for a couple of years. So I think they've moved on to something else. But this gives you an idea of the kind of thing that you're being asked to do, right? So, welcome to Flutter International PokerStars. So they're saying, this is the technical interviews for front end engineers. This is a public repository, so you can go and check this out. I've put a link in the slide deck to this. It says, we would like you to test the following, and here's the website. You will need to be browsing from a UK IP address to access. So you might not be able to actually access it yourself because this is the UK version of their website. Okay. Please bear in mind that the site is highly data. This is really important. You know how I was talking about implicit requirements? So they're noting it. Please bear in mind that the site is highly dynamic and both the content and the layout may change over time. You will not need to register or log on to the website to complete this test. So it's saying here, highly dynamic. So you need to be demonstrating some kind of skill about testing highly dynamic websites. That's going to be important in your response to this. And if you look, there's a couple of tasks. So the first task, it says write 10 or more Gherkin scenarios to cover behavior on the homepage. So they're saying, actually, the first technical task isn't to write code as such, but it is to write some scenarios, right? It's like go and write some tests. And it looks like they've updated this, because I don't think this is the same version of the test that I actually originally completed, and that's fine. I think they've potentially moved on from the one that I did, and which was in Cypress. And then it says create a simple JavaScript framework using WebDriver IO. So they've moved on, and Cucumber, to automate a selection of scenarios you've created. You should include at least 5 scenarios. Okay, so they're saying, and here we go. So I was saying about setting up test environments, development environments. They're giving you the technology you need to set up. But if you look, that doesn't tell you which version of WebDriver or which version of Node to use. You need to go and make those decisions yourself. You need to go and set that things up. After completing the task, please update the README. Anyway, this is an example of the kind of thing that you might get. Okay, so I'm going to go back and show you the next one now. So this one is actually one that I did complete. So this is one that I did. This is a one that I actually did for PA Media. They don't use this anymore, so I'm sharing it with you now. It's not one that they're actively using. And this one is a technical test. So I'm not kidding. They're asking me to test the MetaWeather API using Cypress. So I know Cypress is a web-based testing tool, but they're asking me to do tests based off or like an API test using it. I will be glad to tell you I did not use Cypress to do any API testing once I arrived at PA Media. I told them they were bonkers, and we did something else. So this is the README that I constructed for this task. So execution instructions. So I've got information about how to actually clone the repository. I've got information on how to install the npm dependencies. So this is the kind of thing I'm telling you, right? Is as well as the fact that you've actually got to write the code that passes, that does the test, you've got to have these kind of make it easy to run, make it easy to actually get people to evaluate what you're doing. I've spoken about how I did some work to understand how the Meta API works. So I've called out the fact that I'm using some test data and the way that I'm using the test data so that they could create more test data. So I'm saying this is the way that I'm actually doing the test, and this is the way you could add to it and do more. So what I'm showing here is that I'm writing my test code in such a way as I'm going to be pleasant to work with as a colleague, right? I'm writing my test code in a way here, not the test code itself, but the documentation. I'm trying to demonstrate one of these implicit requirements that I will work within a team and that I know that other people will need information transfer. Then I think I found a bug or something, so I'm just highlighting something there. And I can show you some of the tests, but I'm not sure how much an arbitrary code. That's just some of the test data. Right, I'm going to move on to the next one. So another step on my journey, is that I'm starting to create tools, and I'll talk about them a little bit more in a moment, that are tools to practice testing interview exercises with. And one of the ones that I've created is a tiny little tool called Fast Quotes, and it doesn't do much. All it really does is you can add quotes, and by that quotes, I just mean like a person said this thing at this time, and this is the kind of link to it. And you can get a random quote, right? It really does very, very little. It's an API, it does very, very little. But I created these like challenges, these little exercises, and one of them was go and find choose an enhancement and go and implement it. And I am forever grateful. Dom Johnson, within a few hours of me having actually put this challenge out there, gave the absolutely fantastic best response. And I'm going to copy this into the chat. You can go take a look at this. There's a link to it as well. This really demonstrates, and bear in mind, he hadn't watched my talk, he hadn't looked at any of these things. He's just really good. So he's given a full description. What does the PR actually do? You don't worry about the details, but look at the headings. He's got details of the changes, the things that have actually been done in the pull request. He's got details about how you should test the pull request. He's got details about why the change was actually necessary in the first place. I am not ashamed to tell you, this is a better description of a pull request than I have probably seen from any colleague I've worked with in my professional experience. This is flipping outstanding. If you write your pull request to this standard in a technical interview exercise, people are going to be impressed. You do not even need to go to this level as Dom has gone to here to actually be impressive. This is fantastic. And he's added notes for reviewers and additional context. So he's actually saying, these are the things I want feedback on. And additional context, this contribution is part of an effort to modernize the project setup. So he's put here, future improvements may include. So this is exactly what I'm saying, right? Don't have to do everything, but one of those things that's a really commercially relevant skill is how you can identify things you didn't do that could be done next. And the reason you don't just go and put the extra effort in now and do them is that your product manager at the company you're going into will love you for suggesting enhancements, but letting them prioritize them. That's really important. You don't just go and add things in and go, yeah, look, I did some cool stuff. Yeah, but then you're using their time, right? So that's really important. So I'm going to move back to the presentation now, but I hope that was an interesting illustration of the example. Let me see. Let me just say, just a little check on how I'm doing for time. So the examples are there in the slides. We can go through those. So resources you can use to practice. So some other places you can go and practice on. I've spoken about the fast quotes. There's an exercise there. Again, links are in the slides. Evil Tester, Alan Richardson. If you haven't checked these out already, Alan Richardson's API challenges are absolutely fantastic. You don't have to actually even respond to them with automation, but you can. If you want to learn more about API testing, they're really fantastic. And they're a great example of exactly the kind of things you could be asked to do in an interview. You can pick up some similar skills. And finally, this, like Andrew Knight, the Automation Panda, this list of different things you can practice automation on demo sites, like it's a better list than I could come up with on my own. To go and look at Andrew Knight's list. Coming closer to the end now, so document your journey. So like take advantage of the fact that you're going on this journey, and I'm going to be doing something similar. This is in progress for myself. When you're going to be spending all this time learning about automation, learning about how to do these interview exercises, you're learning skills. Write a diary, write a blog, write some kind of portfolio, document your journey. That's also going to be really useful for you. And these are two resources that you can use as inspiration. Andrew Jones's 10 portfolio projects for automation engineers is gold. And Beth Marshall's post about reasons you should consider a test portfolio is very powerful as well. So I said that I'm building some practice apps. So that fast quotes one is one that I've done already. I'm still working on it. You can go and check it out now. But in the future, I'm looking at building a more comprehensive kind of app in order to do some practice testing, some practice interviews on. And I'm hoping in the future I'm going to be able to also use this and probably do some live streaming sessions where me and hopefully teaming up with some other people, we're going to have a go, like trying out those challenges, give some live examples. So this is Project Snack Shop with the Make Believe Collective. So this is the collective name for myself, Vernon Richards, and Lissy Hock, and we're working on this kind of fictional project in order to create this more comprehensive practice tool. It's very early days, but watch this space. Take a deep breath. Take a moment. Go ask some questions. I really appreciate all of you for spending your time here to watch and to listen to me. I appreciate, depending on which time zone it is you're joining in, and if you are watching this live, you may well be on an evening and you may have other things going on. You could be out eating some food up or having some fun with the family. I really appreciate you taking some time, and I hope this has been valuable for you. I'd also like to give a very quick shout out to AJ Wilson, Dom Johnson, Caleb Kandal, and Andy Peterson, who gave me a whole lot of feedback on LinkedIn around this topic, and I've integrated some of that into the talk. So I hope I'm about on time. We are at any questions, and I'm going to end that poll. Let's see what we've got and show it on stage. So, do you write code in your day job? Oh, so we've got a good split here. Yes, only test code, about half. That's pretty good. Also, people writing some tools. Nobody's writing production code. That's fair. And a bunch of people not writing code. That's pretty good. That's a good mix. So, yeah, Arun, do you want to come back up? Let's do some questions.
Yep, 100%. I I love the session. Okay, awesome. Do you have the first question? Okay, we can start with the questions. Um, that is amazing, folks. If you are having any sort of question, please post that in the Q&A tab. Okay, I will be picking up the first question, which is, do you have any recommendation on where to put our portfolio?
A great question. So, a little bit. So, first of all, do make sure you set up your GitHub README. If you have a GitHub, make sure you set up your GitHub README to kind of be a good homepage for you. That would be my first bit of advice. And then the second thing is, if you have your own website or you have a blog anywhere, set that up as your portfolio or part of that as your portfolio, and just make sure you have that prominent on your LinkedIn. Right, make sure it's front and center. And then finally, if you're applying for jobs, put a link to that on your CV, put a link to it on the job application. Make sure it's in front of people who need to see it. That would be my advice on that one. I hope that
Awesome.
helps.
Next question is, hello Ben, can you please share the 10 projects of automation testing portfolio?
Yes, they're also in the slides, but I'll share that link now in the chat.
That is
There you go.
awesome. Okay, we are having one more question, which is, how do I make the most of the time during live coding interviews? And what are the good do's and don'ts?
Oh, this is a great one. So I'm going to be very straightforward. I've not done much in the way of live coding interviews. So the one that I have done, and this is why I'm on a journey, I am not at the destination. One I did was not a live coding interview like with a panel of people, but was on one of these websites like HackerRank. I did not make the best use of my time and I failed miserably. It was a horrible experience. Do not recommend anything on HackerRank. Um, and that one's just going to be a case of you need to have, I guess, done a lot of practice of those kind of interviews before. Now, as for live coding interviews where you're with a real person, I'm still kind of looking into this. I haven't got much experience of it, so I'm kind of interested if anyone has good answers to this. I don't yet.
That is awesome. By the way, Ben, I really want to appreciate your efforts. This was one of the most interesting presentations or the sessions I have attended. The kind of efforts you have put down in making the presentation is commendable. Yeah, this is
Thank you very much, Ron. I really appreciate it. I really hope to hear from some people who were here today and learn a bit more about the journeys that you're on. I think this is the thing, right? Is I'm on this journey. I'm trying to gain some more confidence. I'm really looking forward to feeling confident in
yeah,
this. And I really hope that other people are going to join me and gain some confidence in this. I think I don't say it explicitly in the talk,
yeah,
But I think it's really true that learning to interview is a different skill than learning to do the job. And that's really where I'm at, is that I'm
Yeah.
very confident I can do the job. I am less confident I can do all of the interview steps. And I want to really overcome
Mhm.
this. So I think I'll feel happier staying where I am and knowing I could move job quickly later if I need to, as long as I get that
Mhm.
confidence in the interviewing.
Yeah.
And I think that'll
Yeah.
that'll make me a happier a happier person.
Yeah. That is, I think that is it from my side. Thank you very much, Ben, for coming and spending time with us. Once again, I'll appreciate the your efforts for the presentation. Okay, and we don't say bye in the community. We say happy testing. So I'll just type happy testing
Okay,
in the
happy testing, everyone.
yeah, happy testing. I'll see you in the community.